All right, welcome everybody. So excited to have you here for another installation of Practical Creativity, where we unpack the creative process so that you can put it to use in your life and work. I could not be more excited to be here today with one of my most favorite creative people, Arohi Bhatt. She is amazing. She is all about learning and innovation and creativity. And so, of course, we're soul sisters. So what I want to do right now is just turn it over to you, Arohi. Tell us more about who you are and what you're up to right now. Oh, I don't think you're with me on Instagram. We're waiting for you. But go for it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, here we are. Go live with Arohi. Hopefully it's going.
So I'm having this, what's it called? Just some technical issues. The Instagram is lagging. So can I just stick with Facebook?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm gonna hop off here then.
Okay.
Because, or actually, hold on. I think it's resolved now. Can you see me on Instagram?
I can.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I would aim it a little higher so we can see your eyes. Yeah.
Okay. We're like
perfect
making do here.
We are. Yes.
With our like homemade studio. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. You asked me, what am I up to? So I currently work for Teach for America. I'm a director of adult learning. And so basically what that means is I've been working for Teach for America for almost 5 years now. I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary. Wow. Yeah, I'm very excited. Wow. Yeah, for real. And I would say like almost every year on staff at TFA, I was doing something different. I have spent most of my career on the Miami regional team here. And I have done finance, operations, some talent work. I did development, fundraising for a year. And it was such a great experience because I got to see, all of the inner workings, what happens to make a nonprofit work and to achieve impact. And personally, moving from different roles and acquiring new projects and all of that, there was a lot of learning that was happening for me. This role opened up on this national team, and I had never had formal adult learning experience, but I was really, and still am, very passionate about how when organizations can master learning, that's how we can innovate and move faster and achieve more impact. I think about all the learning that happens when you're offboarding from a role, onboarding to another role. Learning happens during manager one-on-one check-ins. Learning happens during every single weekly team meeting. I think sometimes we think, oh, learning is only happening in these formal trainings or in these conferences. But one of the reasons why I took on this role in particular was to kind of start seeing how we as an organization are learning and innovating, and specifically in applying principles of adult learning to the work that we're doing. So kids, there's pedagogy on how students best learn. And then there's also andragogy, which is how adults best learn. And adults and kids have different, sometimes similar, there are overlapping needs, but they're also very different. And so basically in my role at Teach for America, I get to work with teams and staff members who are facilitating that learning, whether it's for our teachers, our core members, whether it's for our staff, and professional development, leadership development, personal development, and then also in our alumni. And we're thinking about our network and mobilizing our massive network of teachers and alumni and working towards educational equity. Like, how do we get all of these people to organize for achieving this vision for ed equity? So that's kind of like broadly what I get to do in my day job. And then outside of that, I just recently launched Radiant Women, during quarantine.
Exciting.
Very exciting, very exciting. And that is also, it started out just as I was beginning to feel a little bored during quarantine, not having the usual routines and structures that I typically
we can all relate. Yes.
Yep. And I was reading a book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Have you heard of her?
Yes.
So she has this book. I was reading this book. It's my Bible. Like, it's filled with sticky notes. I've been revisiting it. It's an incredible book if you haven't read it. So I was reading that book, and also she'd been doing these Monday meetings where she would talk about different things. And specifically, one story that stuck out to me, she was talking about her own creative process as a writer. And she said that she was getting a lot of questions. Glennon, I think I might be a writer. Am I a writer? What do I do to start? And she told this story that really stuck with me. She, at the beginning of her journey of sobriety, she found herself, attending her first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. She's in a basement of a church, looking at a pamphlet that says, you might be an alcoholic if, you might be an alcoholic if. And she realized, if you're finding yourself in that position and you're holding that pamphlet and you're in that church basement at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, wondering if you're an alcoholic, very likely you might be. And similarly, then she was saying, like, if you're being kept up all night thinking, wondering if you're a writer, wondering if you're a creative or an artist, then you probably are.
Yeah.
You probably are.
And Taylor Ann here on Instagram is saying this is so relatable, and she loves Untamed. So you've got some fans out there who are Glennon fans as well, which is great. So, okay, we're refreshed on IG. All good.
So what were we talking about?
Classic symptoms. Yeah, classic symptoms. You might be a writer, you might be a creative, you might be an artist, you might be an alcoholic, whatever it is.
If you're like comparing yourself to other writers, you're seeing writing like, I could be doing this better. I have a story to tell. This one, Michelle Wolf, this comedian, she has this bit where she talks about tweets being tiny manifestos and blogs being conversations that nobody wanted to have with you. And
as a blogger, this is important to hear, okay?
No. I think the point, like, at the time it made me laugh, but what she is saying essentially is like very on par with a lot of messages that we receive as women, as a woman of color. We're just inundated with messages of, don't be quiet, be docile, be polite, follow the rules, don't be messy. It's yes. Yeah. And I realized, I had internalized a lot of these messages. This Radiant Women essentially was born out of this desire to be having a conversation about what holds us back from being creative, both at work and in our personal lives. Yeah. And I was having these conversations with friends of mine, and I realized, like, I wanted to have a more formal platform to be able to talk about the things that are inspiring me, that are inspiring other artists and activists and disruptors working towards social change.
I love that. So the platform, Radiant Women, what does that consist of? And, I love it when people take a challenging time and create, because that's what I do. And that's natural to me. I'm not saying it's the only or the right thing to do, but it gets me excited that, if you look at something that could be just so challenging and like stop you, instead you take it as a way to kind of create and to empower yourself in that way. I always think when you create, you are taking action towards something. You might not know what that is or where it's going, but you feel inspired, and then taking action puts it out in the world, which can feel very scary. So tell us just a little bit more about what is the platform? How are you empowering women in this way? And it's a very inclusive platform. So tell us a little more.
Yeah. And I do want to start by saying that, like, we're in such a unique moment in time. I've been seeing this like craft shaming meme going around that like, you know, especially at the beginning, there was all this talk around, you have so much time, like make it useful and meaningful and purposeful and do all the things. And the fact that we are just like surviving during a pandemic, let alone like thriving, like that is, you know, a win in my book. For me personally, because I was doing some reading, it just happened to be like at the right moment in time. I had the space and the mental space and the desire to be creating something. I finally, when things started like quieting routines and stress and things had kind of like melted away, outside of just the stress of being inside of quarantine, I realized I had this like creative energy that I wanted to be channeling into something. So Radiant Women really started as just a place where I was reposting pictures that inspired me, that encouraged myself and other women to like embrace their full abundant selves, seeing the beauty and strength of who we are. And it's been an iterative like project. So when I started, I kind of like, you know, would tell people, oh, it's this like creative project. It's just this thing I'm doing on the side. And over time, things would iterate, and I started seeing like these posts and the writing that I was doing as mini experiments. So rather than thinking, I think often like we say, okay, I see the end goal of like, I want to launch a business. I want to launch a nonprofit. I want to do this big, bold thing. And sometimes the fear or the insecurities or just the feeling of being overwhelmed, like, oh, I have to do this huge, big thing. Right. There's so many baby incremental steps that you can take along the way. And that's what Radiant Womxn started as. It just was playing. It just felt like play. And similarly to what you were saying, another example of like a fear or insecurity that we have is that whatever we create or produce needs to be perfect.
Thank you for saying that, because that is a big stopper of like probably empires of beautiful things.
Yep. One example that always like makes me laugh is, have you ever been to one of those like wine and paint nights?
I have been to one. Yes.
Okay. So I've been to a few of them and I love them. There always seems to be this like group, and typically they're women who are like very stressed about wine and paint night. So like you have the wine,
which is not the point, right?
Literally not the point. You have an instructor who's like walking you through step by step, and like these artists, they're amateur artists, are so stressed about, you know, is my painting going to look right? Are people going to like, am I going to feel good about it? Like, does it look like the artist? And it's like, no. You are unique because of all of the, you know, amazing, incredible things that make you. Whatever you are going to make is going to be amazing because it's capturing that. And I do hear like a lot of, especially women, like who say, I want to be doing X, but like, I'm afraid of what people are going to think, or, you know, it's not perfect yet. And I really think that if we begin to start seeing our work as like just drafts at second, third, and Luma and Bird by Bird, she talks about the shitty first draft. And it's like your first attempt at something is not going to be perfect. And maybe like even intentionally try to make something that's bad. Even like that practice of, okay, I'm going to intentionally fail at something, like people start to get sweaty about it. And that's where it's like, you know, that's the kind of fear or insecurity that I want people to like push up against and just try embrace that discomfort.
That's so great. And when I had Keith Clark on a couple weeks ago, he was talking about how when you have the courage to create, creation is actually the most generous thing that you could do, because when you create, there is a catalytic moment. There's something that results from that. And you know that when you start to create something. So I think that's where people start to kind of choke. But yeah, perfectionism or who am I to create this thing? There's a lot of imposter syndrome that happens when you start to find your voice. But I love what you're saying about like mini experiments and the draft process. First of all, the shitty first draft is great because it just gets it out there, right? It gets it out of your brain and out into a space and that is the first way, that is the first manifestation. Like when you're thinking about it and then you're talking about it and then it's out there, like you've already created it, which means it is a being, right? It is a creative output. But even as we think about like dialing it back and not taking on this big thing, or I have to do this big thing, otherwise I'll be a failure, or I won't have achieved the thing. But sometimes there's joy in just saying like, I'm going to do a micro creation, right?
Yeah.
So
that's actually making me think about specifically within like the design thinking process. So at the stage of like testing, or even like ideating and testing, the point in when you're going through the design thinking process isn't that like you created a full-fledged product or service that you might be bringing to market. It's like you make a quick and dirty prototype. Yeah. You make small, like even just on a Post-it, a drawing of a product that you might be considering to solve a specific problem, and then you test that out first. Similarly, I think at work, like often, we go like balls to the wall. I have this like full email drafted up. I have this full new idea that I want to share with my team. And like, if we can start earlier on in that process of, okay, I have this idea, let me test it out with a few folks. And testing doesn't have to be like a full-blown survey. It's literally just you bring it to your manager or teammate, like, what do you think about this? Has something like this been done before? And that process can help us like democratize creativity and the creative process, the design thinking process. It makes it feel more low stakes. Yes. And when it's more informed that way, the thing that you end up working on and bringing to market eventually is the one that you have tested already. You have evidence that it could work. Right. And what you were also sharing like reminded me like this micro creativity. Like when I was a kid, I loved just being creative. And I've only just started to realize, like looking back, I never left it behind. I used to make up these like elaborate scenarios for playing house. Every time my friends were over, we would choreograph dances to NSYNC. I loved like making creative, finger paints and art and getting messy. And I think like as you get older, you get these messages of, try to fit in, be cool, don't try so hard, don't make this thing. And I think as much as we can tap into like the things that made us happy as kids, can begin that practice of low stakes, creating something just for you, just enjoying the process of like tapping into something that we used to do as kids can be really meaningful and inspiring in and of itself.
Totally. And when I was at the Kennedy Center and I was really like focused on strategic planning, like my job was to create strategies for organizations to succeed in the nonprofit industry all over the country, different kinds of genres of, it was the arts at that point. But I remember very firmly learning that even if you're looking at your business and you're super serious about it, whatever kind of business you are, you're a creative, you're a nonprofit, you're a small business owner, whatever, like joy is a strategy. Like joy is absolutely a strategy. We were talking earlier before the call about boards, and like a joyful board is a strategy and usually one that really works. So I love that, because I think a lot of us feel like we get to be adults. We feel like we have to have the answers. We might not know what those are. There's a lot of ego involved in like protecting that we do know, and being authoritative about our point of view, and that we do know the answers when just everybody's really figuring it out. But I love that idea of like going back to a time when you were happy, and you've come to some of my creative jams, and we've had many conversations where we just start from the happy place. So I think that's a great strategy. Just go to joy, find a moment in life, or an activity you used to really enjoy when you were little, or still enjoy as a basis to create, and allowing yourself to play. That's something you said earlier in the conversation, which is do we allow ourselves to play? And what does play have to do with learning? Because also creativity and learning are very involved. And I love that you, as a professional learner and Teach for America, and you're thinking about how we innovate through learning. Part of your own creativity is you learning about you. Tell us a little bit more about kind of that whole process of you as a learner / creator, because I have found they go hand in hand, but what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's such a big, juicy question. Yeah, I mean, I even think about like, I'm currently enrolled in, I'm getting in the process of being Luma certified. And I'm doing it through work.
And tell us what that is, just in case people haven't heard of it.
Yes, Luma is, thank you. It's a methodology framework for bringing design thinking principles to work. It helps facilitate creative collaboration, helps facilitate like innovation, human-centered design within like whatever structure you're thinking of, whether it's team meetings or whether it's cool. Strategy sessions. I think for me, if I can say like where this like learning and creativity has kind of converged for me is I'm currently reading Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown. And the book itself is incredible. It's this collection of essays, interviews. She's a Black feminist scholar, thinker. And specifically the premise of the book, the argument that she's making is how do we make the pursuit of social justice the most pleasurable one? And specifically, like when we talk about liberation and are thinking about, that's what we're working towards. How can we, what are we picturing? What does liberation look like, feel like, sound like to us? And how do we bring elements of that into our current day to day? Another thing that she says is that all organizing is science fiction. And that you are creating something a world that doesn't already exist. So for me, like I see like creativity, learning, and this like pursuit of social justice, making art for good. That's where I like my sweet spot, where I'm trying to think about how do we like iterate from where we've been? How do we consider like people's individual experiences within whatever context, work or within our communities? And how do we begin to tap into our radical imagination, our creative intuition to make art for good? And I don't want art, when I say art for good, I don't want us to think that art can only be visual art. It's not just painting on a wall or even like graphics and memes on Instagram. Like those have been really, especially like recently with the uprising that's been happening in our country, there has been just so much happening on social media and a lot of learning that's been happening on social media that I think is very cool. But specifically, I think I want to, when we talk about Radiant Women, when we talk about art, I want us to expand what our definition of what art can be. One story that like sticks with me is my great grandmother. She, my family is from India. She, at the age of 11, was from the small village in India. She was married off to a man who was much, much older than her. She was illiterate. And she, at the age of 14, 15, was pregnant with her first child. And every day she would go to her temple or she would pray at home and say, I'm going to make one son a doctor, I'm going to make one son an engineer, and I'm going to make one son a lawyer. And not only did she end up doing that, which is incredible, she also had 3 daughters, one of whom became, a dean, like a doctor, one of the first doctors from our village, and became a dean of a college. Another was another dean of a university. So I have a lot of pressure when I think about how incredible my own ancestors and extended family are. But when I think about like physicians, teachers, nonprofit leaders, when I think about people in business, all of these folks are being charged with solving our biggest problems. And we can't just rely on the quantitative or like the standard ways of operating. Like in order to do these kind of incredible things, we do have to tap into our creativity. And what I'm hoping with Radiant Women is that I can begin to share those tools with folks, share those practices, share those mindsets that we need to be able to overcome those fears, to be able to have that safe space, to be able to practice creativity in small ways and in big, whether it's in our personal lives and our professional, and ultimately in the pursuit of social good. If we're pursuing liberation, we're pursuing a world that's different from the one that we're currently living in, how are we like imagining something new and better for our communities?
That's great. Also, you know, in doing a lot of strategic planning work, especially in the arts and nonprofit, one of the things that we always start with is that not-for-profits just start with what they're not for. So defining success can sometimes be a little, what's the word? A little vague, right? So being able to actually get that out there and work collaboratively to, you know, put ideas out there would be an amazing place to start. Taylor Ann says, such an important distinction. Thank you, Arohi. I also want to open the floor if anyone has any comments or questions that they want to ask as we have this discussion. Just feel free to drop them in the comments. And I see Joanne just signed on. Hi, Joanne. So let's go back to something that you were talking about, which is just creativity in general. So you've kind of hinted at your own creative practice. Oh, Taylor Ann says regarding art, the distinction between art. So yes, totally hear you. So what does creativity really mean to you? And what does that practice look like in your own life? So clearly you're learning, but like walk us through also the steps. So what is creativity? And then what does it actually look like in your own life, in your own practice, your own work?
Yeah, that's such a big question that I'm not sure if I've like totally landed the plane on what like that definition is for me. But one thing that is coming to mind, I just watched this like special on Netflix on creativity. And one of the things that's actually, it's very good that if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. One of the things that they talk about is like creativity isn't necessarily creating something from scratch or producing like something, you know, totally new, unheard of, whatever.
Oftentimes, or art, right?
Or art, right? Yeah, I think I definitely had a lot of those internalized messages of like creativity and art and artists are like a specific type of person. And it's only for that type of person who are like very effortlessly hip and cool and all of that. And I can't possibly be, you know, that artist. But truly, like all of us in any role that we're in, like are practicing creativity. And I think a great example of that is just like taking something that already exists and making it better. Taking something that already exists and like remixing it, refreshing it. So whether that's, you know, one example that I have been like laughing about and like really appreciate. Have you seen Patriot Act with Hasan Minhaj?
Not yet.
Hold on. I don't hear you.
Not yet. I think my Instagram is frozen. So, oh, you dropped off the Instagram. You're welcome to see if you can join it again. I thought Mercury retrograde was over. Can you hear me now? The nature of life. You got it?
Now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay.
All right.
So I think I had just asked you, have you seen Patriot Act?
I don't think I've seen that one yet. I might have, but I don't always remember names of things. So
that's okay.
I forget the name of the film, I promise. But
it's Patriot Act is the show. Hasan Minhaj does it. He like he's a comedian, stand-up comedian, but it's been about like different topics that are like current events, relevant to like our country, politics, communities, etc. And one specific example that he just talked about was how like our taxes, the process of submitting our taxes are really complicated. And specifically companies like TurboTax, make it a lot harder to not only like submit your taxes, but that they are charging you to submit your taxes. And that like a lot of people are eligible to file their taxes for free, but they just don't know how, or that is even possible. You go to TurboTax and there's all this confusing language, and you end up getting roped into like paying for a service that you could have gotten for free. So their show created this website called TurboTaxSucksAss.com. That's literally what it's called. But it's very informative on like how people, why so many people get roped into paying for their taxes, even though they're eligible for a free option. They have like a list of frequently asked questions with really like funny, engaging, not boring copy. It has very easily like a user interface. It's really easy to find, a different option to be able to file your taxes for free. And they've done this with almost every show that they've done. They have some like website that they create to be like a very like quick and dirty version of and funny like tongue-in-cheek version of a solution to this kind of problem that is created by like our systems of capitalism and white supremacy. That like there are all these things that when you learn about the problem, you end up realizing there is like an easy, not easy, but like creative solution that could subvert that problem or that system that's like perpetuating that problem. And that is an example of one that I love how like simple it is and how direct it is. And that's something that I'm thinking about too, is like, how can we do more of these sorts of like grassroots ways of like challenging these systems that keep us from being able to live our best lives.
Well, right. And that suppress identity and suppress all sorts of, financial success and business ideas that could be, helpful to everybody. I don't know if you've seen Heather McGhee's TED Talk, but she goes through the whole, she's like on the economics wonky side. And she goes through the whole thing about how the financial crisis in 2008, like the housing market collapse, hurt white people more than it hurt the Black people that it was specifically like, punishing. So I would recommend seeing that, because she goes through saying like racism has a cost for everybody. Like these systems and structures actually hurt everybody, even though it seems like, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, prioritize certain, white people, right? But I think it's really cool to see how she actually shows us that there is a cost to systems and structures that suppress, oppress, marginalize, et cetera. So 100%. I love what you're saying, because it just rings so true. And we have to get creative in order to go into the unknown. Like you were saying, you're not going to find innovation in a closed system, like you were saying before, but you really have to go out of your comfort zone. And that's kind of the role of creativity and where we have to go if we're going to make a world that is more equitable and just and beautiful, where people can be who they are. And we need them to be who they are, because why do we need everybody to be the same? That's not very exciting. So what else? I know we're wrapping up here, but like any closing thoughts that you want to share, anything that's giving you hope or inspiring you a lot right now? Are there people that we should be knowing about or following? Who do you admire? Anything that you have as like a closing thought, we just love to hear, Arohi. And I've so enjoyed this conversation, and thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you this has been so much fun. I love talking about this stuff. I would say one thing that has been like inspiring me is TikTok, funnily enough.
Yes.
I was very judgmental about TikTok. I have a sister who's Gen Z, and just was making fun of her all the time. Just ended up getting one because I was bored during quarantine. Ended up making my own. That was just, and it was super fun. Like, I think the thing about TikTok that's been really cool is that there are so many young people, Gen Zers, millennials, who are creatively talking about social justice. They're talking about systemic racism. They're talking about, life hacks and the humor and the like creativity within these like small 15-second or 1 minute long videos has been really inspiring to me. They're really rough and there's not this like huge high production value, but they really speak to you and they can like elicit all sorts of feelings and inspire you to take action. And so that's one thing that I think as part of like when we talk about creativity, there's a lot of judgment on like what is good creativity, what is good art. And I'm trying to let go of that and try to find that are even within our everyday and the media that we're consuming, the things that we're reading, the people that we're talking to. What are those like moments of inspiration and moments of like play that we can pursue? And yeah.
Totally. And that really brings it back to kind of like going micro, right? So I love that. Well, thank you again. I just put the URL if you want to hear about further upcoming conversations with amazing leaders and thinkers and creativity experts like Arohi. Please do sign up. And otherwise, Arohi, this is such a treat. What a beautiful conversation to have on a Monday. And it gives me so much hope to hear everything that you're working on. And I'm so excited to be brought along the journey. Where can people find you? And we'll put it in the show notes and in YouTube. But where can people find you and find Radiant Women and stay on top of all of the great stuff that you're doing?
Thank you. Yeah. So for right now, the place to be is at radiant.women with an X on Instagram. I'm in the process of starting a Facebook page and a website and all of that. So join the Instagram and follow there, and then all these sorts of updates and my own like creativity process that I am now made. I'm trying to make as transparent as possible. You'll be able to follow.
I love that. Yeah. Welcome in the tribe. Welcome in anybody who wants to create and be some part of something that is experimental and evolving every day, inclusive, and great art for all, because we all get to decide what that is. And joy is a strategy, your TikTok thing. So
yes.
It's all there. Great. Well, Taylor says, thank you both. This was engaging, inspiring. Thank you for inspiring me and for our whole community. So thanks, everybody, and stay creative.
Bye.
Bye.